There's hackers and nerds that code, and then there's the ultra wealthy. Where do you need to go to be successful? The wealthy people who invested in startups were all situated in the Bay Area that were like willing to fund very quickly. What they realized was money doesn't come to you, you go to money. In New York, you can't go on a camping trip and get 100K from somebody. Someone came up to me on a camping trip and was like, I want to invest 100K. That doesn't happen in New York. So I'll give you another example. Some guy ran up to my co-founder, was like, I want to invest $1 million at an event, a networking event. I actually invested the money that they said that they were going to invest. Another example, I was walking down the block one day and I ran into a box executive. We're on their center stage like a month later presenting because I just ran into that person like walking on the street.
California feels still like a kind of frontier state. So like Silicon Valley, especially, there's like abundant wealth to be created. Europe feels like there's finite wealth and everyone's fighting over their share of a fixed pie.
Yeah.
Whereas California feels like there's potential like abundance. There's like such an enormous like set of opportunities. You can all win and you can all succeed. And so people like lift each other up. You come to Silicon Valley with an amazing idea, even a stupid idea, honestly, and people just like encourage you and like ask how they can help and make introductions. And it feels like positive sum. We'll all succeed together. Not like if you succeed, I'm going to lose out somehow. So it's that optimism and belief that anyone, if they work hard enough, can make something exceptional. It's kind of the American dream almost. And I think there's no greater place for that than Silicon Valley.
New York is a really nice place to live. I think it has a really nice culture. I think the people there are amazing. When it comes to entrepreneurship, it's just almost non-existent. There's the entrepreneurship like, I'm going to start a pizzeria. There's the entrepreneurship like, I'm going to start a private tax firm. But overall, the theme of New York is like, where can I find a job? And maybe I could go work for Citibank or, the big guy, Bloomberg in the city, the stock. Yeah. So maybe there's something in stock, you could do that. And then you kind of like hobble around, like bouncing around a lot. And there's nothing really, I would call it like a hyper optimism in Silicon Valley where hyper optimism and executions. And an example like AMD and Intel were started. They became like ultra wealthy, right? Like, and then Fairfield was another like AMD type thing. And basically it was like ragtag small teams of people like building lots of stuff. And they were doing it in technology, which was ultra scalable. But then from those AMDs and from those Intels and from Fairchild, you get people that like burst out. And I kind of view it as like a starburst of like millionaires. And these millionaires are like, I made a bunch of money in tech. I need to find someone that I can also help and give them some of that money and advice to help them. And then like what happened was one of the guys saw Steve Jobs in his garage and he's like, I'll give you some money. He gave Steve Jobs some money. And then Apple was the next burst. So you had all these other millionaires that were just like out there. And then like people saw like what was possible. And then you had like people like believe. And then, one person said, I'm going to invest in these guys called Google. And then like that thing, it's like a star bursting, like all these millionaires were bursting. And the one that's like the most relevant today is the average employee. I live 25 minutes from nvidia. Employee at NVIDIA's net worth is $20 million. Yeah. What that tells me is it's going to blow. Like, what I mean by blow up and explode is all the employees at some point will leave and retire or leave and like just do something else. Maybe they'll be, but like they have this mindset, we did it. Where and who else can do it like me? And I will give them like goodwill and money. I mean, there's more pieces to this. Like the government, like back in the really like, I don't know, this was like years ago, they were funding a lot of like testing projects and stuff like that at Stanford University. So there's a lot of like crazy stuff that was happening. But I travel a lot of places. I never have seen anything like it. I think what's happening right now is they call it Cerebral Valley. So there's like hundreds upon hundreds of startups in San Francisco. I see it happening already. It's like there's a new genre of like startup and OpenAI is there, Anthropic, a lot of these like really, really smart startups that are all like migrating back to San Francisco to like all these rich NVIDIA angel investors. And you have all these rich Google angel investors, and then you have all these like, VCs like all situated. Like other cities aren't structured like that. And they also set up all these incentives, like venture capitalists set up incentives to make if the company wins, all the employees win. Like there's this also thing like you get equity culture that happens in Silicon Valley. I mean, you get a piece of the business. Like I don't see a lot of other cities doing that. I'll give you an example. Slack. Like every employee at Slack had equity. They had stock options. Twitter, every employee had stock options. OpenAI might be a weird one. It was a nonprofit. It became a for-profit. I don't know what's going on there, but I understand the mechanics of like what the incentives are to like get that company like to that point. So when you ask that question, like it's hard to articulate. It's like the actors are all in LA. You could be an amazing actor in New York because there's actually a lot of support. New York is probably one of the best places. But, like, if you wanna be in the movies, like, the movie, like, you wanna be, like, on the screen at a movie theater, the popcorn, all that stuff, you know your best chances are to go to LA because they have all that infrastructure, and they have all that stuff, and they have all of those movies and those movie producers all there. So it's way different vibe. And, like, people ask me, like, "Just come back to New York." I'm like, it's so hard to leave. It's like the forces, like, pull me in. I don't know if a lot of the entrepreneurs that have been really successful would have been successful without the support system of Silicon Valley. There's anomalies like Jeff Bezos. He was in like, Washington. You think of like really successful entrepreneurs like Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce. Would he have been as successful if he started his company outside of Silicon Valley? I would say no. Let's see, the founders of OpenAI, could they have even done what they wanted to do if they were outside of Silicon Valley? I would say no. So the history of Y Combinator was it was started in Boston. Harvard is there. So the founders of Y Combinator were like, let's set it up here. Let's do it here. I don't know if you know this, like Y Combinator was a summer program originally. It was a summer program that Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston had set up where students could try something and then they'd just go to their next semester of class. What they realized as they were like doing Y Combinator and running Y Combinator was there's hackers and nerds that code, and then there's the ultra wealthy. Like, where do you need to go to be successful? The nerds are transient, meaning like nerds or hackers are transient, meaning like they don't have a lot of like weight, like meaning like they don't have a mortgage or a house. Like a lot of them are like young, and they're willing to like move anywhere in the world, but like people will move for money. What they realized is all the ultra wealthy people, they're all around the world, but the wealthy people who invested in startups were all situated in the Bay Area that were like willing to fund very quickly. So they took Y Combinator, lifted it, and moved it to Silicon Valley, like, and then just set up shop here. They bought a building. It was a really beautiful building. They set up the orange build, like I'm sure you saw the inside of the building. But what they realized was money doesn't come to you, you go to money. I think that's why, like, why are people flocking here? Because there's so many people out of NVIDIA that have $20 million per person. They're probably buying their house, they're investing in startups, they're figuring things out, they understand tech. Like, there's a lot of this visceral, like, healthy dynamic going on. Now, people get upset with me when I tell them this, but it's like I would not have been successful in where I was. Say it. I feel like I needed to, like, move myself to, like, another area to find people to plug into. So if you have a co-founder, if you're thinking about starting something with a co-founder that's in the Bay, let them stay here, but just come here or you go to them. Like one or the other, you trade off. Like they come to you. I don't know, but maybe the world is remote now. Like what are your best chances of success? Like how do you set up for success if